Well, thanks very much, and good morning, and thank you all again for being here for this very important work. As noted, I am an alumni. When I received my degree from the University of Illinois, that was shortly after Moses had come down from the mountain with the inscriptions. But as I was getting off the interstate, since it's just a 2.5-hour drive from Indianapolis, and driving into this facility, literally parts of my life were flashing before my eyes. I saw Green Street. I saw all these different places. I am not telling you about any of those incidents today because that would not be appropriate. But it's great to be back, in a sense, to be home and have a chance to visit my alma mater. But I'm also particularly glad to be here with you today, given who you are and what you're trying to do here in Illinois, which is really to help to dramatically change the game and increase post-secondary education attainment in Illinois. And what I want to do today is spend a little time talking with you about why the Goal 2025, which is what I know here in Illinois you're embracing that goal. I've talked to some of we work a lot with ISAC here. They're working very diligently on that goal. We're very appreciative of Lieutenant Governor Sheila Simon's embracing of that goal. We think it's the right goal. We don't want it to be Lumina's goal. We want it to be Illinois' goal and Indiana's goal and the country's goal, because we think it is absolutely essential. So I want to talk to you a little bit, at the risk of perhaps preaching to the choir, about why this dramatic increase in education attainment in Illinois and in the country is absolutely necessary and urgent if we hope to have any kind of an economy or democracy that will serve us well in the 21st century, and that will have any hope of providing the level and quality of life for our young people that we have experienced and enjoyed over the last half of the 20th century. So let me talk just a little bit about why this is so important. But let me preface this by saying that I want to be very positive here in saying that the work you guys are doing here, and I will point to some other examples, getting to this goal, dramatically increasing college success rates and the number of people with high quality, and I emphasize high quality, post-secondary credentials that actually matter in the workforce and matter in life. We know how to do this. There's not a secret sauce we're trying to invent here. We have examples all over the country of systems and institutions and states that are making tremendous progress on this goal. The problem is they remain what I like to call islands of excellence. They remain small examples of success. And somehow we have not been able to make this a part of the water supply of our education system. In one place back east, I said a lot of times foundations are guilty of contributing to this islands of excellence phenomena, because we will fund an initiative, we will do it for a few years maybe, we will evaluate it, we will show that it works, and then we will step back with great pride and wait for a prairie fire to occur for this just to spread across the landscape. And that theory of change has clearly not worked over the last 30 years. Now, I'll tell you, it's sort of an amusing thing. When I used the prairie fire analogy back east, they didn't know what I was talking about. Someone came up after and said, "What's a prairie fire?" But I figure Illinois, I could use prairie fire as an analogy, and it will be all right. So let's talk a little bit. First of all, what is the goal we really should be trying to achieve? And that's Goal 2025. What is that? Several people noticed someone with a T-shirt with Goal 2025 on here earlier, which I was very pleased to see. This basically is to move this country from where it has been stuck for the last 30 years at least, with about 40% of its workforce with a high-quality post-secondary credential, to 60% by 2025. Now, that is an audacious goal. That is 23 million more credentials that we're on track to produce at our current growth rates. Now, we have been making some progress. Again, I don't want to be totally the negative nanny here. I mean, we have been increasing at 0.5% per year in our overall percent of our population. Last year, we increased a full 1%, but the rate of change is too slow. And meanwhile, as you'll see in a moment, the rest of the world is not waiting for us to wake up and get moving. Korea, for example, in the last international comparison data, increased its college-level workforce numbers by 5% in 1 year. 5% in 1 year. And other countries like Finland, Canada, and others are making dramatic progress. So there is an urgency to this. So 60%. Now, how will we get there? Sometimes when I use that phrase, 23 million degrees, people think that's when they run screaming from the room. But if you go to our site, in our most recent strategic plan that we recently released in January of this year, we actually have a roadmap about what needs to happen to high school graduation rates and college going rates, and what needs to happen to college success rates, and what do we need to do with the adult population that's already out in the workforce that's undereducated. And you put all that together, and they're reasonable numbers, and you do come up with a full 24 million degrees. But what does Illinois need to do? Well, right now, at the current trajectory, you will, as you can see here, you will probably be in the 40s by 2025 if you don't do anything to bend that curve. And what you need there is about, as you can see, between 79.8 million and 103 million, you need about you need to increase that number significantly to get to 60%. But there are ways that you can do that, and that's part of what we want to talk about today. Now, that's the U.S. numbers. This is the Illinois numbers, I'm sorry. So your numbers are much more doable, right? So basically, you need to increase your output so that you are moving up about 700,000 degrees or so between now and 2025 to really hit that 60% number. And again, I'll talk to a minute about why we didn't just throw a dart at a wall and say, well, let's just pick 60%. Sounds like a nice round number. And I'll tell you why that's so important for each state as well as for the country as a whole. This is what I was talking about earlier. Here's how the country will get to that goal. And we wanted to show how. So for example, if we could get the high school and college graduation rates up to 75% grad rate in high school and 70% college going rate, which is better than we're doing now, but not as good as the best states are already doing. So people are already doing better than this. That produces almost 3,600,000 degrees. If we can improve the college graduation rates to a level, I'm not going into detail on this, but to a level that is better than we are now, but not as good as the best public systems and states are already doing. So we're not talking about doing something here that somebody hasn't already done. We're just talking about all of us upping the ante. That's another 5+ million degrees. Adults first time in college. We have huge numbers of adults in the workforce right now who stopped out after high school or maybe didn't even complete high school who need to come back. Louis Soares, in a recent paper he did for the American Council on Education, estimates there are 60 million adults in the workforce right now who could benefit from coming back and getting some form of post-secondary credential. 60 million. Now, just to put that in context, between now and 2020, the United States is estimated to produce 30 million high school graduates. So while it is important to create the pathways, and we'll talk about that more here later, from high school on into college, we have to create pathways for adults to come back. Because if we don't do that, it's sort of like if you had a large lake whose education water quality was poor or not as good as you wanted it, and you had some reasonably sized but not big feeder streams coming into that lake, and you paid all of your attention to those feeder streams and didn't try to recycle the water in the big lake back through, it would take you a long time to get that lake water quality up. So it's not an either or. It's improving the pipeline and the pathways for students coming up through our system, but it's also increasing the pipeline for adults. Because as you see here, the big number there is returning adults. These are the folks, we are funding 19 initiatives around the country right now, spending millions of dollars to learn how do you do this. And these are the students, of which there are about 36 to 37 million in the workforce, who have some college and no degree. They are, to put it bluntly, college dropouts. They went to college, they accumulated credits, and they left with nothing except perhaps debt. So we talk a lot about the high school dropout problem in this country. We have a huge college dropout problem, and we have to fix that. If we could get just 1 out of 5 of those folks, millions of these folks have 40 credits, 50 credits, 60 credits, 90 credits, 115 credits. If we could get just 1 out of 5 of them an opportunity to come back and join a pathway, get into a pathway to a meaningful degree that will help them, that will have an enormous impact on the quality of our workforce. And I just want to emphasize this. Last week, I guess, I was speaking at the America's Promise meeting summit in Washington. That's the organization that Colin and Alma Powell head. And one of the things I said there, because they are really focused like a laser right now on a 90% high school graduation rate. And we are making progress in terms of high school graduation rates. But my message to them and to you is high school graduation in the 21st century is the starting line, not the finish line for education. And in fact, a high school diploma by itself, as I will show you in just a moment, is largely a ticket to being working poor in a 21st century economy. Okay? So this is why, and again, certificates are included in here because, particularly for our community college colleagues, but even in the 4-year, we know there are a lot of industry-recognized, career-focused certificates, sub-baccalaureate and sub-associate, that we should be paying a lot more attention to because they do produce significant employability and wage gains. Now, I know I was a professor for 20 years. I know education is about more than jobs, right? I know it's about citizenship and all the other things, and we support that kind of work. But to say that education is not about preparing someone for a seamless transition into jobs and careers, to my mind, is crazy talk. I mean, I don't know why the adults that are coming back, my son's in college. I sold my house. I live in a condo in downtown Indy. There is no basement. He must have a job when he gets out of college. So again, at the risk of spending a little time preaching to the choir, but maybe every once in a while it's nice to get together at a choir and sing a few good hymns and get all fired up so when you go out to work among the heathen, you can convince them why this is so important. And I hope some of the information I share with you today, maybe a little bit of new news that empowers you and gives you some tools to, when someone comes to you and gets into the silly talk that we're seeing around the country today about, oh, we have too many college graduates because of the recession, or not everybody needs to go to college. We have to give students choice about whether they want to go to college or not. We don't give them choices about whether to get inoculated against disease in school. We don't let a young person decide, oh, I don't think I'll take that disease vaccine. I don't want to, because we know the implications of having an unvaccinated population in our school systems. Well, let me tell you, letting a student make the decision they are not going on to some form of post-secondary education and credential is condemning them to a life of working poor, as I said earlier. So we've got to begin to push this harder. Why is it important? Well, this is probably data you've seen, and this is global competitiveness. I'll start here because this is not the argument that wins the day in a lot of, I do 40, 50 trips a year, probably make 70 presentations. This is not the argument. It wins the day with employers, with international companies and others who are looking for talent. But beat Finland or beat Norway is not exactly the thing that brings you all up out of your seats to say, yeah, we're going to get those people. We're going to go on top of them. It's good. We need to learn from them. But I just want to make this point because I think for all the educated people in this room, we know an undereducated talent pool in this country compared to global, on a global competitiveness frame has all kinds of dire implications for jobs in Illinois and jobs in Ohio. So as you can see here, we are among our young workforce. Note this is the 25 to 34-year-olds. A future of our workforce, we only have the 12th most educated workforce in the world, 12th among the developed countries. But let me these are our states. Oh, there's Illinois. So Illinois is about at the national, a little above, right at the national average, or a little above. You're slugging it out with France, Israel, and Belgium. But notice there's a whole group of states in the United States that are slugging it out with Slovenia and Greece for education bragging rights, right? This is not a good sign for us in terms of attracting jobs because every governor, I'm going to speak on Sunday to the National Association of Workforce Investment Boards in Washington. Every workforce investment board, every economic development officer knows Illinois is not just competing with Indiana, Michigan, and Iowa for jobs. It's competing with Singapore and Ireland and Germany and countries around the world, and Shanghai and others. This is stuff, again, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. You guys know this stuff, the dramatic impact in terms of reduced unemployment and higher wages depending on the more education you get. But this is something you may not know, and I want to just spend a moment with this one piece of data. I hate to kill you with data here, but we work a lot with Tony Carnevale and the folks at the Georgetown University Center for Education and the Workforce, and they track a lot what's happening to the labor market for us so we can begin to talk to higher education about how it better aligns itself with the actual needs of the economy. That blue line that you see here that is dropping off the charts are the decent jobs available to high school graduates. We lost 5.6 million of those jobs during the recession. And since the recovery has begun through early 2012, we lost another 260,000 of those jobs. Those jobs are going away and they're not coming back. That's what I meant earlier about high school graduation has to be the starting line and not the finish line. For associate degree holders, we did lose about 1.6 million jobs. It was painful for everybody in the recession, but their job market has pretty much recovered. They're back to where they were before the recession. For four-year college degree holders, we never lost jobs, even during the depths of the Great Recession. And in fact, there are 2 million more jobs now for four-year college graduates out there in the workforce than there were before the recession began. I know that some people they look at that data, they just don't believe it because they've heard all the stories about the college graduates driving taxis. You can take, we've had policy directed by anecdote. It's a long history and tradition in Illinois and across this country. It might be nice if we actually looked at the data. And one other piece of data just to reinforce this point. In 1980, the wage premium over a lifetime for a four-year college graduate over a high school graduate was 40%. That's good. That's about what it should be in an economy that's meeting its talent needs. You should get something for going to college, right? But in 2010, that wage premium was at 74%. And if we don't change those trajectories I just showed you, those lines, it will be almost 100% by 2025. 100%. Any labor market economist will tell you that is evidence. When you're paying that kind of a premium for a product, excuse me, I don't need to refer to our dear children as products, but when you're paying that much premium, you have a shortage. You have a shortage. And it's not good for the economy. It's inefficient. When you're paying that kind of a premium for talent, which is what this all basically boils down to, that's money you can invest in other things to create new jobs and expand businesses, right? And for the few, the proud, and the SAT gifted who get to go to college, I can think about my son and think, well, that's cool. Look at the premium he's going to get. But for those who are left out of the college mix, and again, I want to emphasize when I say college, I'm including certificates of value, 2-year degrees, and 4-year degrees. For those who left out of the mix, that is an economic disaster for them and for the country. Why must Illinois achieve this goal 2025? Again, work done by the Georgetown Center by 2018. Let's see, that's not that far off. I'll still be alive then. That's how close it is. 64, at least I hope so. 64% of Illinois jobs will require, new and replacement jobs will require post-secondary education. Remember where you were, right? On your current, you're nowhere near that. So where is that talent going to come from? How are you going to keep the businesses you have now, much less attract new businesses at the current levels of talent you have in the state? And by 2018, 1.3 million of the 2 million job openings will require post-secondary credentials. Now, the key here is to figure out what kind of post-secondary credentials, and that's what you're about here today, right? You're about creating pathways that will lead students on the road to the kinds of talent that you need in Illinois to be a successful state. These data are just clear. I hope that creates a sense of urgency. That's just 5 years off. You could have companies leaving the state that you don't want to have leave the state. You could be failing to attract companies to the state you want to attract to the state because of a talent deficit. That's how urgent this is. So what must we do to achieve this goal? And one of the things we must do is what you guys are doing, and I want to talk about that in a moment, is creating a very structured pathways program that is particularly a game changer for low-income and first-generation students and students of color. This pathways work, we know it works. And the reason it works is because, well, some of you may have read some of the recent work that has been done in psychology around the negative impacts of too much choice, right? They've done the marketing studies. You take a table and you put four kinds of jam on one table, and down the way there you put 12 kinds of jam on another table. I'm not going to get the numbers exactly right. And then you track who buys the jam. Guess what? The jam with the 4 kinds of jam triples and quadruples the amount of sales of the one with 12 forms of jam, because too much choice paralyzes you. And yet in higher education, we take students with no support infrastructure who've never been to college before and don't understand our system, and we slap a course catalog in front of them that's about that thick with 8 options for math gen ed, 7 options for English gen ed, et cetera, and then we wonder why they get lost, why they get paralyzed. Why we have 36.2 million adults in the workforce today who went to college and didn't finish. So we really have to begin to think. I want to get into that a little more, but this pathway, one thing though I want to be clear about, because we have K-12 here and we have higher ed here, right? Which is wonderful. What this goal requires, let me be very clear about this, is tremendous increases in participation in higher education, that's access, as well as tremendous improvements in completions in higher education, that's success. It's not an either or. If you think that the way to solve the completion problem is to narrow the neck of admissions and only accept those students who are going to graduate unless they get hit by a truck, okay? That will not solve the country's problem. We've got to bring more people and different kinds of people into higher education than we've brought before, and we have to make sure they succeed. It takes both. And that's what you're doing here today. Your pathways are about access and success, and that's what makes it so exciting. We have to focus, I mentioned adults, but we have to focus on 21st century students. I am always frustrated when I'm inside the Beltway in Washington talking about federal policy around higher education, that so many of the people up there think that what American higher education is a four-year institution with dorms where students come and live and go full-time and go to football games on Saturday. That is a shrinking minority of American higher education. And to create, and the problem is, of course, most of those policymakers, that's the route they took, and most of their staff, to be honest with you, if they're staff from Indiana to an Indiana congressman, they probably went to Notre Dame or IU or Purdue. They probably didn't go to Ivy Tech. So their experience is that same kind of experience. We've got to begin to think about what do these students need. The 17.6, the 75% of the undergrads who are juggling work, family, and school. 75%. My son is a shrinking minority. I don't want him served. We should still serve those students. But we've got to develop policies and practices that are oriented 21st century students. As I said, in Illinois, this is your data. This comes, by the way, from a report called all this data, most of it comes from a report called A Stronger Nation Through Higher Education, which is on our website. It breaks out these education numbers by state, by county in the state, and by the top 100 metropolitan areas in the country. So you can really get down and start thinking about what do we need to do in this county. What do we need to do in Illinois as a whole? But you can see here, 22% of your workforce. And an updated version of these numbers will be available in about 2 months. This is 2012 data, based on the 2010 American Community Survey. The next one will be a year up. But these numbers, they haven't changed much over many years, and they're probably not going to change much in 1 year. But clearly, over a fifth of your workforce is in that some college and no degree category, for example. What if you could get 20% of them back to go to college and get the degree? We've got to achieve equity. The completion agenda and the equity agenda, the equity imperative has got to be joined at the hip with the completion agenda. These are your rates for different groups. Look at those differences in those numbers. Huge gaps. Illinois is not alone in this. Illinois is not alone in this. It's in every state you go to. And I want to say something here that may be a little controversial, but I want to say it anyway, which is that we have to ask ourselves, we have to have some, in ATD they talk about courageous conversations. And we have to have some courageous, honest conversations locally, statewide, nationally, about why we have been so comfortable with these gaps for so long. And I would suggest to you that part of the reason is, underneath, between the lines in the discussions of opportunity gaps for low-income, first-generation, and students of color, that there is a sort of an assumption that these gaps exist because of who they are, because of what they don't have. Not that we have a system that is set up to inequitably provide opportunity for different kinds of groups, that our system doesn't know how to provide the education effectively across all of our diverse populations. I just throw that out as a possibility and honestly confront that. I'm going to move along quickly here. So equity, income, they kind of overlap. It's like a Venn diagram, right? And this to me is one of the most startling statistics I've run across in a while. If you look at the 2010 census among 24-year-olds in this country, which is the post-college age for traditional students at least, you find that 4 out of 5 24-year-olds from the upper income quartile have a 4-year college degree. Forget certificates, forget 2-year degrees, they have a 4-year college degree. If you are wealthy in this country, to not get a 4-year college degree, you almost have to try. You have to jump off the college-going boat, tie a rock around your ankle, and drown yourself. Okay? We do a darn good job of educating wealthy people in this country. Meanwhile, among the young people from the lowest income quartile is barely 1 out of 10. Now, what's the implications of that? Because sometimes, a lot of times it's us and them. I mean, I suspect there's very few people in this room who are in the bottom income quartile, right? But let me tell you what the consequences of that talent loss are. When I think about the 9 out of 10 young people who we toss off the college boat on the way to the shore, and I think about the loss of talent, I'm reminded of a video that I saw at the America's Promise meeting, not this year, but last year, where there was a very wealthy family in Alabama, gated community, big home, etc. And their daughter was bitten by a recluse spider, which, as you know, for a young person can be deadly. And no one knew that, and no one could kind of figure out what was going on. She was getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And finally, they rushed her to the emergency room. And there was a young emergency room physician there who figured it out, who figured out what had happened, got her on an ambulance, rode to Birmingham Medical Center with her, kept her alive on the trip, and saved their daughter's life. That young man came from a very, very poor family in Alabama, who, not because our system works so well for those people, but through a whole lot of lucky happenstances and other things, managed to go to college, get a medical degree, and become an emergency room physician. Without him, it's very likely they would not have a daughter today. So when I think about the 9 out of 10 kids and the talent we're throwing away, I think about how many other children's lives weren't saved. Not to get overly grandiose here, but I think about diseases that weren't cured. I think about businesses that went under or offshore because of a lack of talent. I think about states that are struggling and sinking under the weight of enormous Medicaid, public assisted, and prison bills, the result of an undereducated population. That's why this is so urgent. I know I'm running out of time here, so let me talk just a few minutes about, and I want to ask, then I hope we'll have a chance for a question or two. What are the kinds of things we need to do? As I said, we really believe this pathways work that you're doing is a game changer, because we really believe that for the students we're trying to reach, and remember, to get to this 60% goal, the only way we get there is through moving more low-income, first-generation students of color and adults through our system than we've ever moved before. Remember, 4 out of 5 rich folks already have a 4-year college degree. We don't get the numbers from them. We don't get the talent from them. We get it from the groups we failed so miserably over the last several decades. So we got to change this, and we think the pathways are a very important strategy for helping. I played bowled for a fundraiser for the United Negro College Fund the other day. I haven't bowled in a long time. And so I had a lot of gutter balls. And we have a lot of gutter balls for students going to post-secondary education. What we need to do is to set up these pathways, starting in high school, where students have choices. They may say, I think I want to go into health professions. Okay? And they get to make that choice. But once they make that choice, they don't have any more choices, very little. They don't decide what courses they're going to take in high school. They don't decide what courses they're going to take in college. The pathway is laid out, and actually they have what I didn't have, which is bumpers along the lane. So if they try to get off of it, they bump back into the lane again. There are institutions with our new technology capacities that have set it up so a student can't even register for a course off a pathway unless they see an advisor and make the case for doing that. But these kinds of structures are what we need to reach these students and get to success. So I want to emphasize pathways starting in high school. We talked at breakfast about your dual credit programs and the way those are expanding and making sure those transfer. Regional collaborations, we're really funding a lot of work in metropolitan regions around the country to bring together employers, education leaders, political leaders, community foundations, community organizations working with these populations to begin to align their actions. Because what we find in region after region and state after state is that there are 1,000 random acts of excellence going on in that state around these issues. Many, many programs. But what's happening is they're not aligned and the impact is not occurring. So how do you set a goal, like Goal 2025, and how do you come together as you're doing today to work? Early Promise scholarships or other activities we're exploring. We talked a lot today at breakfast about Common Core implementation. We think that's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to really finally get this K-12 to higher ed thing right and quit blaming one another for the failure of our students and fix it. Adult-focused policies and practices, as I mentioned. What about success? A culture of mutual accountability. Leadership that champions the idea that whether it's U of I, Champaign-Urbana, or it's Northern Illinois, or it's community college, wherever it is, we are responsible for our students. And we are responsible for their success. And we're not going to put on this Teflon coating that higher education has had for so long, where when all these students fail, When 40 to 45% of our students don't make it, we blame the student because they weren't prepared enough, or they didn't work hard enough, or whatever it was. We don't say, what's wrong with our system that we're not doing a better job? No business could survive losing half of its raw material on the way to production, right? I mean, it couldn't make it. It would be too much waste. So these limit options, again, that's what you're doing. Cohesive cores, early alert systems, many institutions are putting in place, and we have technology capacities today we've never had before, where they can integrate their data systems. And so Purdue has done this, for example. And they can, if a student misses 2 classes in a week and gets arrested for a drunken disorderly in downtown West Lafayette, they know that. And a red flag goes up. And there's interventions in place to go to that student then and say, what's going on, Joe? What happened? Why are you drinking so much? Why'd you miss 2 classes this week? It's not a system where you wait till the end of the semester of the school year and count the dead bodies on the field and feel badly about it. It's designed to have just-in-time interventions. There's a lot of this. I don't have time to go through all this. Intrusive quality advising. Intrusive, I mean, we've got to, I mean, I grew up in the area of when we were all opposed to in loco parentis, right? It was like, oh, they're college, they're grown-ups, just let them do whatever they want to do. That's not working. So whether it's student services, whether it's interventions around student support, whether it's advising, whether it's pathways for academic programs, we got to get in the game. And we've got to use our expertise to help our students follow the pathway to success. Again, I'm not going to go through all this. Oh, I just want to, so these are some things that we've done. Stop late registration and create late start classes. The data is clear. Students who register late don't do as well. Get them in there, and then if they don't have late start classes, so they're actually not starting a class late, but they're actually starting a class when it starts. And the last one, take attendance. We've got all kinds of research that says, as Woody Allen said, half of life is being there. And you can have the best classes and the best faculty and the best systems in the world. If people aren't showing up, it doesn't do any good. So I know college students would rail at this, but we find over and over again, institutions that take attendance and ensure that students are in the classes, it does better. So some of this stuff is not, as one of my friends said, rocket surgery. And you know what? As I said before, we're seeing institutions all across the country. And I mainly have 4 years here because but I could point to Achieving the Dream Institution, leader colleges, and Achieving the Dream at the community college level. These are institutions that had, for example, large equity gaps, equity opportunity gaps 5 years ago. And the leadership of that institution championed intentional change, reallocated funds toward game-changing practices that worked, and they have seen anywhere from 25% decreases to entirely eliminating the equity gaps for their low-income and minority students. So they've done it. Again, it's not secret sauce. It's not magic. It's learning from one another, as you're doing here, and making that a part of the water supply. So I congratulate you on this Pathways work. I think it is, as I said, a game changer. I'll just conclude with, since my PhD from Illinois is in communication, and I've taught a lot of public speaking, so you can't end without a quote, right? That's part of the deal. But truly, one of my favorite poets was Adrienne Rich. And I used to perform Adrienne Rich here as a part of the oral interpretation, whatever it was here at Illinois. But she wrote something several decades ago, applicable to something else, but I think it can be applied to what we're doing. She wrote the following: "The rules break like a thermometer. Quicksilver spills across the charted system. Whatever we do together is pure invention. The maps they gave us were out of date by years. I would suggest to you the maps we've been using in our K-12 to higher ed work, our adult learner work, are out of date by decades. And the finish lines we've been thinking about are out of date by decades. So I know what you're here to do with these pathways is to create new maps for our students, new finish lines for our students that will ensure that they have a successful life individually and that we have a successful country. A democracy not plagued by income inequality, an economy that is competitive with the globe and provides the kind of quality in life and jobs to our students and our children that we have had the privilege to have." Thank you very much. So, what do you think? I went a little long, so should we just go on and move on? Maybe a couple of questions if anybody has a burning question. I meant to allow more time for this, but got a little carried away there, sorry. I don't care about any of this stuff, actually. Any questions anybody would like to, or challenge, or wait a minute, this doesn't make sense to me. Yes, over here. And I'll repeat the question so everybody can hear it.
Your chart showing the difference in jobs for high school graduates and community college and baccalaureate. Showing the baccalaureate never dipped, and indeed is increasing. The companies I work with in our career tech ed in high school are screaming about more skilled jobs. And I know you've had several caveats of college doesn't mean necessarily a baccalaureate degree, but when we keep seeing that emphasis, I've seen other charts that don't show that show the huge need for middle school jobs and more certificates and associated with applied science degrees rather than transfer degrees. I just would like you to speak to that because in the area I'm in, the minute I say college, everyone automatically thinks baccalaureate.
Well, and that's part of the problem. As I said, everybody thinks college. When we say everybody needs college, people immediately think four-year degree, and that's not what we're talking about. Those are overall national data, but I think what we're finding really you need to do, and this is part of what we're calling our regional mobilization work. We're in the Long Beach area, the Phoenix area, San Antonio, South Texas, Savannah area of Georgia, Memphis, Tennessee, Louisville, Kentucky, New York City, Syracuse, New York is a great model for this around their Say Yes to Education campaign in Syracuse and Buffalo. What you really need to do is take this down and look. I was just in South Alabama with the South Alabama Community Foundation, the 12 counties they serve in South Alabama. Airbus is coming in to South Alabama, okay? Not because they have an educated workforce, because Alabama gave away the farm to get them there, frankly. But in any case, but now they got to deal with this, right? Airbus needs all those things. Airbus needs people with industry-recognized certifications. It needs people with applied associate degrees, and it needs baccalaureate-trained people. My point is, Brookings Institute does a lot of this with cities. They call it the economic trajectory of a region. And so what you need to do is drill. One of the things you really need to know is not where are the jobs just now, but where are the jobs projected to be by sector going forward? And then how do we, whether it's certificates, maybe, what is it? I don't know what it is for Illinois, and I don't know what it is for Central Illinois, certainly. But to try to track that out, because if you don't do that, it is the case. Tony's work and other work suggest any college degree, and again, using college broadly, post-secondary, any college degree is better than none. But there's an enormous variability in the payoffs for different kinds of credentials and certificates and college degrees. And that even varies by region depending on what the job market looks like, unless you're willing to pick up and move to Oregon or California, which actually most people don't do. Okay? Most people go to college within a delimited geographic area, and most people stay in that area. We're not as all mobile as people think we are. It's a very small minority that picks up and goes across the country to go to college and then ends up in, somewhere else degrees for the majority of our population. So I would just say to you, those are the national data. And again, I would point the associate job market has recovered and it is moving forward. I just think you need to drill that down. We are doing some work in 5 or 6 states right now, for example, where in those states they have the data systems where if they just connect some dots, they will not only be able to tell what happens to every high school graduate in terms of what happens to them after graduation, who goes to college, who does not, where do they go. And I know you have a high school feedback report here that does that in Illinois. Did they go into remediation? Did they persist to the second year? But now we're going to be able to say what happened to every college graduate in that state by major and institution. 1 year out will be the first report because that's where we start, right? And then it'll be 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So I like to say it this way. I was a department chair for longer than I want to admit. And I like to think if I were getting an annual report as a higher ed university department chair that a significant percentage of my graduates were not employed in anything that had anything to do with what they studied and or were unemployed, the first thing I would have done as a good faculty member would have been to have criticized the research design and the methodology and try to discredit the study. I mean, that's obligatory, right? As a faculty member, one must do that or you lose your union card, right? But after that, every year I keep getting this information. I like to think even my most curmudgeonly faculty days, it would have occurred to me at some point to ask the question, why? Why is that? Do I even know who should be the employers of my graduates? I would argue that in many academic programs higher, they don't even know that. And then once I figure that out, how do I engage them in the conversation to say, well, what are you looking for? What's the learning? I'm not talking about making widget makers here. If you talk to many of these corporations and employers, these hospitals, other people, they want people who can be analytic, who can be problem solvers, who can be autonomous on the, even line workers who can be autonomous on the line and make problem solving decisions. They want people who can work with diverse workforce because they have one. They want people who can communicate effectively and orally and in writing. I mean, they want these things. So we're not talking, but I would work with them, and I would have them work with my faculty to make sure my curriculum was up to date and aligned. I would have, maybe I need a bigger internship program or externship program. I mean, I don't know what it would be, but at least I'd be asking the question, why? Right now, as students walk out that door, other than the development office trying to keep track of them so they can ask them for money, we don't, for most places, don't have a clue what happens to college graduates. I mean, they have a few anecdotes, the good ones, so-and-so got a great job. But what happened to the bulk? So we're trying to create this system where the alignment is greater in the interest of our students and of our democracy and our economy. So again, those are the national data. I can't say they're not, but I do think we're going to have to get down to the state and regional level to say, where is the future of our workforce headed? And how then do we align our education system so it meets those needs, so that we can have a vibrant economy, so that we can cut public assistance costs, so that we can quit sending so many people to prison and engage in this kind of mass incarceration we've been doing in this country for the last 30 years. So what do we need? So that's a longer answer than, yeah, one other question, and I know we've got to go.
It's more to build off of that. My name's Ben Brock from the Illinois Chamber of Commerce. I think, if I understand what she was asking, throughout your presentation, you kept saying college, 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 college. From the business side, the second you say college, even if you mean the technical schools or the junior colleges, you've lost my members.
Yeah.
Because they need those members, they need those middle areas. I'm not sure if post-secondary education, higher education, I'm not sure where that is. But from the business side, I was sitting here curious until halfway through when you said, oh, I'm actually talking about technical and community college and higher education. I'm one of the pathway leaders right now for transportation, distribution, and logistics. I sit down with people, businesses, and say, I need your help to develop these pathways, to identify these learning areas. The very first thing they ask me is, are you talking about college degrees, or are you talking about technical degrees? I was going through some of the reports that you guys have. It's a lot of good information. I'm excited to sit down and really go through it. But from the business perspective, I'm not sure if you've heard this before, the second you say college, their mind immediately switches to a four-year degree, somebody with more training, and oftentimes not the technical training they're looking for. So just not so much a question, but just something to keep in mind. I mean, the data is there. What you're trying to do is there. We're all obviously here because we want to do the same thing. But there is a messaging problem there. And you're not going to be able to, I think, anytime in the future, no matter how much money and how much resources, get past the general public's understanding that college does not mean what they think it means, which is right now a four-year degree in the traditional form sense, in the traditional I went off to state or kind of whatever it happens to be. So just something more to bring to mind and ponder moving forward.
I appreciate that. And we had, when we started this journey back in 2007, when we set Goal 2025, we had a debate about what to call this. We tested post-secondary. No one knew what that meant. They all thought it was high school. Secondary, post-secondary, they didn't draw the distinction. And the reason we landed on college, and we're grappling with your point because we're running into some of the same reactions and having to keep saying what we mean, is because what we're trying to say is, and maybe there's a better word to say it, is this system has to be integrated. Because one of the things I'm going to say to the workforce investment boards on Sunday is, we have got to stop this siloed form of learning, where you go to a workforce investment board and you do some kind of specific training, and maybe you even get an industry recognized credential, maybe, and for a job. Yet, if you then want to build on that and want to go back and get an associate degree at the community college in that same area, majority of times they're going to tell you got to start from scratch, because that doesn't count, not taught here. So the logic was to say it's all part of a coherent, whatever we're going to call it, it's got to all be a part of a coherent learning-based system, so that certificates lead to associate, lead to baccalaureate. Because I was just in Mobile, and they're focused a lot on industry-recognized credentials in the shipping industry, manufacturing, and then things that Airbus is going to need. But I asked them this question. That's what you need now. What are you going to need in 5 years and 10 years? So I think you got to blend all that together. If you guys could come up with a better way to frame this, we would welcome the feedback, because we run into the same problems. But somehow it has to be a thing that says it's not about workforce training over here and higher education over here. We have a workforce training system in the United States, and it is called American higher education. And we need to bring these systems together so the focus is on credentialing learning along a pathway, for your point, and not, for example, seat time. I mentioned at breakfast, one of my friends is fond of saying that if you're focused on seat time, you're focused on the wrong end of the student. So I think we've, so how do we, I do take we run it, your point is well taken. We run into this all the time. And the question is, how do we use language that says it is a system, it must be a system of learning that people move through with stackable credentials and pathways that's connected from high school right on through to wherever they decide that endpoint is for them. And how do we do that in a way that makes sense to people? And maybe college is the wrong term, but yeah, I take your point. Well, thank you very much. I deeply appreciate your attention, and good work. I hope you get this. This could be really helpful for Illinois, and I hope some of what I shared here today might be useful for you in both making the case as well as thinking about your work going forward. Thank you very much.